And I have yet to do a video on Bernie Sanders because although I can say right off the bat I disagree with his economic stances, I do think that he is hitting on a lot of important points, and that needs to be said. There are important points being made by his campaign and by him and in his speeches. Namely, he stands against corporate welfare and deals like the TPP. He also talks about income inequality and inequality in general across the lines of people of color, and he talks about the prison industrial complex. Again, I'm not trying to take away from anything that Bernie Sanders does talk about, so let's get that out of the way, because I know the first response I tend to get with these conversations is, well, you're ignoring all of the good that Bernie does do. And no, I'm not ignoring that, okay? I'm not ignoring that at all. But I'm simply saying you cannot ignore the other side of his discussion, his talks, simply because you like some of the things that he's promising to do. So, I'm going to go through 4 points one by one over the next couple minutes, and they're all fairly simple. The links to everything I'm saying are going to be below the description of the video. And if you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, if you feel the burn, please address these 4 points I'm making. Don't call me a hack. Don't say that I must be a Republican. By the way, I'm an anarchist, so I don't really see much point in voting, but I'm also a journalist, so I see point in holding these politicians accountable and fact-checking the things they say. Also, as an activist, I have some fears that many people are sort of being swept up in the mania of Bernie, much like they were in 2008 over Obama. And I know some people will say, oh, Obama didn't have a record, look at Bernie's record, etc., etc. But as I'm about to point out, if you look at the finer details, I think it becomes more clear that we can expect more of the same in a Bernie Sanders presidency. And if in the event he doesn't win and doesn't get the nomination, let's say it goes to Hillary Clinton, well, he's already said he would endorse Hillary Clinton, so that's something else to remember. So all of you who are supporting him, you have to ask yourself now, honestly, and thinking about your principles and what it is that you like about Bernie, if he decides to endorse Hillary in the end, if he cannot win the nomination, would you choose to listen to him? Or would you stand by your principles? And I would say, from what I can tell, most of the reasons people seem to support Bernie Sanders are because he's the opposite of Hillary Clinton. So it wouldn't make much sense to me to go then and vote for him. But as a journalist, in 2012, I went to the Republican National Convention to report on the RNC and someone else who had a lot of chatter going on, Ron Paul, and I saw firsthand how the Republican Party changed the rules at the last minute and sent delegates to the wrong buildings and turned off lights and did all sorts of silly things to keep votes from going on so that Ron Paul could win and through the delegate process. And I expect that if Bernie Sanders is truly a radical and an outsider, that the Democratic Party would do the same to keep him out if he has not agreed to, play the party role. So I will not be responding to any comments that do not address one of the 4 following points. If you just want to comment and say I'm an idiot because I don't support Bernie Sanders because he's the best luck we have, or whatever, like I said, I'm a Republican, etc., then I'm not going to respond to you. But for those who are serious and actually trying to make change through the political system and are ready to be honest with themselves, then I hope you'll be willing to consider the following points. First off, we had the first Democratic debate this past Tuesday. The goal here is to get to the truth of the matter. So it's not about our emotions and whether or not we want to help people and what we think we should do in regards to that. This is about facts and what it adds up to. So Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton pitched plans for free college tuition, playing down the cost of taxpayers and brushing past assorted other perils to the education system. Let's look at some of the claims on Tuesday night and how they compare with the facts. Clinton says, my plan would enable anyone to go to a public college or university tuition free. You would not have to borrow money for tuition. Sanders, make every public college and university in this country tuition free. The facts. Free for the students, but someone has to pay. Clinton and Sanders both would shift more college costs onto taxpayers and away from parents and students. Sanders' plan would cover tuition and fees at public universities, a $70 billion annual expense, with the federal government picking up 2/3 of that tab by taxing trading in the financial markets. So we're going to get back to that point as well. He talks about paying for the free colleges by taxing Wall Street speculation. Students would still be on the hook for room and board, and costs that average around $9,800. Clinton plan is bound to cost more than $35 million over 10 years that she projected, so Hillary Clinton is not exactly being straightforward with what her plan costs, and Let's touch on this real quick. Bernie Sanders discusses the tuition, right? And he says he's going to pay for this by taxing trading in the financial markets. So then I click over here to this article from Cafe Hayek, and this is coming from Donald Boudreaux, professor of economics, and Martha and Nelson Getchell, chair for the study of free market capitalism at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. So obviously they are free market capitalists, but let's see what they have to say. Bernie Sanders said he would fund his plan to make college free for students through a tax on Wall Street speculation. This statement reveals the frivolousness of Mr. Sanders' economics. If such speculation is as economically destructive as Mr. Sanders regularly proclaims it to be, then a tax on speculation should be set high enough to drastically reduce it. So, the whole point of saying that Wall Street speculation is causing problems in the economy, so then let's tax it to discourage that behavior, and then we'll use that money to go fund college tuition. But if, as Mr. Sanders presumably wishes, speculation is drastically reduced as a result of the taxation, very little of speculation will exist, so there won't be much left to tax, and thus such a tax will not generate enough revenue to pay for Mr. Sanders' scheme of making all public colleges and universities tuition free. And they go on to say that Mr. Sanders sees no conflict between using taxation to discourage allegedly harmful activities and using taxation as a source of revenue proves that he ponders with insufficient sobriety the economic matters on which he pontificates so sternly. So that's their opinion, but the point stands here that if the whole point is to have a Wall Street speculation tax, which is what Bernie has said several times, and that's how we're going to pay for college tuition, then if it works, which we would hope it works, right? If speculation is so bad, then the point is to tax people to give them a disincentive to speculate further. So then if they stop speculating, where's the money going to come from? Where's the money going to come from to pay that tuition? Just answer me that. That's my first point here when it comes to Bernie Sanders. The Wall Street speculation tax in college. That's what I would like to hear from you guys. Point 2. So when it comes to Bernie's college tuition plan, he also recently appeared on Bill Maher's show, and Bill Maher, grilled him about how is he going to handle this, how is he going to pay for this. He says, here we go. Sanders' agenda also includes moving to a single-payer healthcare system, guaranteeing workers paid family and medical leave, and providing universal healthcare and pre-K education. Bill Maher said, so you're saying we can pay for all of this without raising taxes on anybody but the 1%. And Sanders replies, we may have to go down a little bit lower than that, but not much lower. So then this morning, Bernie Sanders was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And if you see here, Bernie was asked about his plans to implement all these changes. The Wall Street speculation, the getting rid of these loopholes and making college free and raising the minimum wage and healthcare, etc. So George Stephanopoulos starts asking him, and I'm looking at the transcript. You can see the video. It's on ABC's website now. Stephanopoulos says, but to pay for all your programs, you're going to have to do more than tax the 1%. How far below the 1% are you going to go with tax hikes? Sanders says, it's not true that we have to go much further. I just indicated to you some of the proposals we have. The proposals we have to provide public colleges and universities tuition free will be paid by a tax on Wall Street speculation. Go back to point 1, please, and answer my question if that Wall Street speculation tax is going to work. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, a huge need out there, and creating millions of decent jobs will be paid by doing away with the loophole that allows corporations. So George Stephanopoulos says, so no. Sanders is still rambling, of working families in the middle class. Stephanopoulos says, tax hikes below the top 1%? No tax hikes below the top 1%? And Sanders says, I didn't say that. I think if you're looking about guaranteed paid family and medical leave, which virtually every other major country has, so that when a mom gives birth, she doesn't have to go back to work in 2 weeks. This will require a small increase in the payroll tax. Senator Gillibrand's legislation, and we can accomplish that with just a small increase in the payroll tax. And George Stephanopoulos says, but that's going to hit everybody. And Sanders says, that would hit everybody. Yes, it would, but it would mean that we could join the rest of the industrialized world and make sure that when a mom has a baby, she can in fact stay at home for 3 months rather than go back to work. So there you have it. His payroll tax will hit everyone, not just the 1%. So one article over, they're saying that it's only going to hurt the 1%, or we might not have to go much lower than that. Then they're saying we're going to have a payroll tax. So this is my second point. The first one is his Wall Street speculation plan to have free college tuition going to work? Look at the points in there. Point 2 is, Do you believe that he will only tax the 1%, or not much below is what he said? But then at the same time, do you support the idea of this payroll tax to have these plans happen? And if you do, I know some of you are saying, well, I believe that we should all pay our fair share, right? This is fair share. This is the type of mentality we're dealing with here. Well, two things I want to say to that. First of all, I think it's immoral to force people to pay for things that they do not support directly, and that we should have a freedom to opt out of these programs if we don't want to opt into them without having to pay for them. And so that's the first point. And the second is, I think if you start to look at these programs and you really see that we're going to see a lot more tax increases, and the people, the middle class, are going to end up paying for this more than we are being told. Point 3. The third point I want to bring up to you is that on the same night, on the debate, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders both said that they would call for Edward Snowden to face a trial. And, I've already pointed this out, and some of his supporters are saying, well, this is consistent with his viewpoints. He's just saying, yeah, he did technically break the law, but he played a very important role in educating the American people. He should come home, though, and he could have been, and he should face the laws, like come back. And Hillary Clinton says he broke the laws. He could have been a whistleblower. He could have gotten all the protections of a whistleblower. He chose not to do that. For one, guys, really look into the America's whistleblower protection programs, and you can see that it's a broken system. And we just had an article last week on the Anti-Media discussing how somebody who tried to go through the official channels as a whistleblower was then arrested and fired. So it's not as easy as they would make it seem for somebody to just go through these official channels. And at the same time, I can say that I have gone to report at the trials of journalist Barrett Brown and of former military member Chelsea Manning and of Ross Ulbricht, the creator of the Silk Road. And none of these people received a fair trial. Chelsea Manning was a whistleblower. Barrett Brown was in some ways a whistleblower, was exposing important information and was targeted. Ross Ulbricht created the Silk Road and did tons of business, and we're finding out more and more that his case has been completely convoluted. So my point is, Edward Snowden will not face a fair trial in America. So for any of these politicians to just say that he should come home, they're completely ignoring the corruption that is inherent in the system. And this is why, for me, the idea of just voting for somebody to fix things is not going to make things better. It's not that simple. It's not quite that simple, and I'm sorry to break it to you. So Sanders right here. This is another point: is how do you feel about him saying that Edward Snowden needs to come home and face trial? Now, I want to show you this piece right here too. This is from the Huffington Post as well. This is from the campaign director for Fight for the Future, Evan Greer, who says Sanders' Snowden response proves that he doesn't want a, quote, revolution. This is an important point. Sanders keeps talking about wanting a political revolution. Real evolutions do not happen through the political system. They happen outside of that. These are culture changes. These are people like whistleblower Edward Snowden and like the new whistleblower we're going to talk about in a moment, who are actually changing the world without government. That is a revolutionary idea. But within the politics, you're just working within their framework. There's not going to be any sort of revolution taking place. They may get all of us excited and swept up in this new candidate, but we're not going to see massive changes. Even if Sanders was truly, benevolent in all of his plans, do we really believe that the rest of the system is just going to allow these radical changes to take place? I don't think so. I recommend this piece by Evan Greer, Sanders' Snowden Response Proves He Doesn't Want a Revolution, to go further into this idea. And that's my point 3, is what do you think about his comments on Edward Snowden? Is it more of the same? Is this going to be a continuation of the age of Obama, where we've seen massive prosecution and persecution of whistleblowers? Let me know your thoughts on that. My 4th point has to do with Bernie Sanders and his support of Israel and Saudi Arabia. So I know that if you go to fieldtheburn.org, you can check out his stance on the Israelis and the Palestinians, and you can see that he has said certain things that he felt sorry, or he thinks the conflict is depressing, and he's voted for support of Israelis. But as of last July, Sanders joined the rest of the U.S. Senate by unanimously voting to support Israel's actions. And I know some of you out there are still in this world thinking that we have to support our foreign allies, but I am more of the mindset, and I think that many great minds have said that a non-interventionist policy is what truly helps. And by non-intervention, that means you don't support them through funding. It's not just non-intervention in military conflicts, but by having these foreign entanglements and by supporting these nations, we are involving ourselves in these conflicts that have nothing to do with the United States. Also, you can look at the human rights violations of Israel and the way that they have treated the Palestinians, and you can see more reason why the United States, and any person, any moral person in the United States who likes to still believe that the United States represents a just and free country, should recognize the hypocrisy in supporting the country of Israel and supporting this nation. Now, also at the same time, Bernie Sanders continues to support the United States being involved with countries like Saudi Arabia. If you've done your homework, you might have heard of the 28 pages related to 9/11 that Saudi Arabia, according to government officials who have seen the reports, that point a finger at Saudi Arabian financing of the 9/11 crimes. Now, I don't want to get too deep into that, but I just want to say that's one reason why we shouldn't be partnered with the Saudis. Here's another. Mother of Saudi youth is facing beheading, urges Obama to intervene. The Saudi Arabians are planning on beheading another person. We hear all about these crimes and disgusting actions of ISIS, but we don't hear anything about our partners in oil and finance, Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that Obama and Bush have both supported and worked with. And again, maybe you're saying, these are our partners, these are our allies, even if they're doing these horrible things, we can't just pull out from them. Well, then we have no place acting like we are trying to be this country that is about establishing equality and social justice. If we're going to allow people of color and brown men, women, and children in other nations to be massacred and to be killed, like we saw in Afghanistan just a week or two ago, the hospital bombing under the Obama administration, if we're going to allow these type of heinous acts through war and be partnered with people such as Saudi Arabia and Israel who are involved with these things, then we need to just drop the whole charade and stop pretending like this country really gives a damn about social justice and helping people. So the fourth question is then, what are your thoughts on Bernie's continued support of nations like Israel and Saudi Arabia? Can you justify voting for somebody who is going to continue the conflicts over there? Can you justify voting for somebody who's going to continue voting to leave troops behind in these areas that we have destroyed over the last 15 years? And my fifth and final point on Bernie Sanders is this. Bernie Sanders has said that he would not end the drone program. The United States drone program, this violent, dangerous program, which we've had whistleblowers speak out about, including Heather Linebaugh, writing for The Guardian at one point on her experience in the drone program. We've heard about the PTSD that members of these drone units suffer from watching people like a video game on screen. And recently, Bernie Sanders, again speaking on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, says, I think we have to use drones very, very selectively and effectively. That has not always been the case. He added, what you can argue is that there are times and places where drone attacks have been effective. There are times and places where they have been absolutely counter-effective and have caused more problems than they solved. When you kill innocent people, the end result is that people in the region become anti-American who would not have been. And then it goes on and says, Sanders indicates he would limit the use of drones so that they do not end up killing innocent people abroad, but declined to say that he would end the targeted killing campaign completely. The targeted killing campaign is, of course, President Obama's disposition matrix, aka his assassination kill list is what some people like to call it, but it's basically the list of all the people who will die at the hands of drones. Sanders, whose bid for the White House has been gaining support, has largely steered clear of national security and foreign policy issues. On Sunday, he said the campaign is going to spend more time on foreign policy. I promise you we will address this issue. So, as Sanders says that he's going to continue the drone campaign and would allow, selective, which this is what we hear from all of them. I know that some, again, will say, well, at least we don't have troops on the ground. But we're taking the humanity, if there is any humanity, out of war and making it a video game where there's no responsibility and people are non-responsive. And one of the next stories we're going to get into once we finish this Bernie Sanders rant is the drone papers. The papers that were leaked this week through The Intercept by a new whistleblower focusing on the drone campaign that tells us that 90% of targets were not the intended targets. 90% of people who die at the hand of drones were not the people the government was aiming to kill. Do you understand that? So they've launched 100 drone strikes, right? 90 of those people were not the people they meant to kill. 10 of them maybe were. And this is the program that Bernie Sanders wants to continue. And I caution you against having this sort of hero worship and believing that guys like Bush, Obama, Sanders, Clinton, Trump, or any of these people are going to come along and be able to fix a broken machine. And I really, really hope that some of you have had your views challenged, have really heard these points. That was 5 points, actually. 5 points I made. The Wall Street speculation tax, can it really pay for the college tuition? The payroll tax, and will Bernie Sanders actually only tax the 1% or a little bit below, as he says? Third point, can you continue to support him knowing that he says that Snowden should face a trial and should face, repercussions for his quote-unquote crimes? The fourth one is, can you support a man who will allow the atrocities committed at the hands of Israel and Saudi Arabia to continue through the United States funding? And the final point is, would you vote for a man that will continue to support and allow a program that kills people without judicial approval, without any oversight, and where there's nearly 90% of an error? And that's all I ask. Please respond to those comments specifically in the video, below the video. Let me know what you think about those 5 points. That's all I got to say about Bernie Sanders, and until you are ready to address those 5 points, you will not hear anything else back from me about that man.